Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Mel Zanona in Washington, where President Trump is preparing to escape the scorching D.C. conditions. Traveling to Mount Rushmore to deliver remarks as he and the nation celebrate the United States' 250th birthday. Today also marking exactly 4 months to the midterms. The president's speech tonight coming a day before he speaks on the National Mall to commemorate the 4th of July. And 6 years to the day after his last visit to Mount Rushmore, where he delivered a fiery and combative speech during his first term and in the midst of his re-election campaign.
Those who seek to erase our heritage want Americans to forget our pride and our great dignity so that we can no longer understand ourselves or America's destiny. In toppling the heroes of 1776, they seek to dissolve the bonds of love and loyalty that we feel for our country and that we feel for each other. Their goal is not a better America. Their goal is to end America.
Here's a live look at the National Mall, where President Trump is set to celebrate the 4th of July tomorrow with what he's calling a long speech. Events right now, though, on the mall are closed to the public due to the extreme heat that's impacting nearly half the country. We'll have more on that in a moment. The president's address tomorrow night will be followed by what the Trump administration is touting as the world's largest fireworks show. But with the celebration comes continued scrutiny that the president is facing over his personal finances. After legally mandated financial disclosures this week revealed that he'd earned more than $2 billion last year while president. That's more than triple his earnings the previous year, and more than half of it through crypto, an industry that he and his administration oversee and regulate. The president, though, defending his income.
Well, I don't do anything having to do with my business. My kids run it. I put a lot of money. I had a lot of money, and I have a lot of money, and I've made money. I'm a business person. I'm a really good business person. I let people invest it. I don't even know who they are, but it's given to big firms like that are on your show all the time. Mm-hmm. My son Eric handles it. I don't talk to him about things such as this. I think I'd be allowed to. I'm not sure even what the status is, but I don't. Well, and he gives it into these like semi-blind trusts or blind trusts where people invest.
NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins me now, along with NBC News correspondent Julie Tsirkin, who's at Mount Rushmore. Thank you both so much for joining us. Gabe, let's start with you, though, at the White House, because as I mentioned, the president teased that he has a long speech planned for tomorrow on the Mall. What else do we know about that speech?
Well, Mel, the president is touting it as, one of the greatest speeches ever. He's planning for a long speech, as you said, something that he teased earlier on this week. When he was in North Dakota, he said he was going to deliver it at 107-degree temperatures just to prove that he can do it, and he's expecting a very large crowd. But I think in terms of what we know for the speech, we can expect what we saw just several days ago when he gave another speech to kick off the Great American State Fair, a speech that was thrown together at the last minute when several of the acts pulled out of the fair. But in that speech, it was notable in the sense that it was so short. It was a very short campaign-style speech where he really touted his administration's achievements over the last year of his administration. I was there. It sounded more like a State of the Union speech than anything else. But the president touting, of course, that grand fireworks display, record-breaking, some 850,000 fireworks expected tomorrow. And also, he is expected to tout, these military flyovers that we're expecting tomorrow night, just like we saw several days ago when this Great American State Fair kicked off now.
And Gabe, the president has attacked Democrats as, quote, godless communists earlier this week. Is there any sense about whether he'll try to strike a more unifying tone at an event like tomorrow's celebration?
Well, that remains to be seen. Mel, during the speech he gave several days ago to kick off the fair, it didn't use that type of language exactly, although he has significantly over the last several days ramped up his rhetoric against more progressive Democrats that have won recent primaries in New York and in Colorado. So we do expect some of that messaging to come out over the next coming weeks and months as his midterm election campaign ramps up. But it remains to be seen whether he will use such strong language in the speech tomorrow. Certainly a much wider audience. He has said he wants to celebrate America's 250th birthday. But of course, in these polarizing times, it's really in the eye of the beholder what passes for unifying and what doesn't now.
I mentioned how D.C. could be dealing with triple-digit temperatures tomorrow. Gabe, are there any concerns about that dangerous heat, either for the president or for the crowd that's going to be gathered to hear him?
Well, certainly. There are a lot of concerns, Mel, and you mentioned it in your introduction already. The Great American State Fair has been, they asked visitors to leave today until 5 p.m. That's today. Now, the festivities tomorrow, yes, same thing. People aren't being allowed in until 5 p.m. That's later than expected, of course, with these triple-digit temperatures. And already today, the D.C. Fire Department has told our station WRC here in D.C. that they've already dealt with several medical calls as well. And it's something that they will have to keep an eye on tomorrow, especially with so many people expected at these festivities. These record-breaking temperatures now add another layer to the planning for this. And certainly there is some concern among emergency management officials about what can happen with these temperatures so high. They're urging people, of course, to hydrate as they come to the National Mall tomorrow.
Yeah, no doubt. I hope you stay cool as well tomorrow. Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. I want to turn now to Julie, who is over at Mount Rushmore. It looks like it's a little bit cooler, a lot bit cooler for you over there. Certainly a gorgeous backdrop. What do we know about Trump's speech tonight that he's planning to make?
Yeah, Mel, I mean, look at this. It's a picture-perfect day here. It is not as hot as it is in D.C., so I'm sorry about what you and Gabe are dealing with over there, but there is a drought concern here and a concern that there could be a wildfire risk. That's why over the last several decades, fireworks here at Mount Rushmore have been few and far between after 2009, but the president brought it back in 2020. That's the last time, as you mentioned, we heard from him here, and he's going to come here again tonight, marking the nation's 250th birthday with the 4 presidents carved into stone behind him. There's going to be a flyover. The military bands are playing. I spoke to some folks who've traveled here, Mel, from far and wide, Ohio and Florida, and they're hoping the president strikes a unifying message tonight, a unifying tone. But we do know that this event is put on by Freedom 250. It's the public-private partnership that is backed by the president. And the events that we've seen put on by that organization versus America 250 have tended to garner a more partisan tone when we heard from the president. So we'll see if he manages to strike a unifying one tonight.
And as we mentioned during his last visit to Mount Rushmore, he was locked in a heated re-election fight. It was in the midst of a global pandemic. Does the Trump administration plan to note that 2020 visit tonight?
Well, you can expect that he might reference it again. This is a place that he loves, Mel. He has a lot of reference for it. He appreciates the monument and what these sculptures stand for, the 4 presidents that they mark as well. And the last time he was here in 2020, it was not only COVID, it was the George Floyd protests. There was a lot of pushback to the president coming here in the middle of a pandemic. It was also months before he lost his re-election bid in 2020. Now coming here in a different way. I talked to some of the officers and branches of military that are involved here. They've been practicing and planning for this for more than a year. We know this also comes on the eve of his remarks tomorrow in Washington, D.C., but certainly this is going to be quite a sight tonight with the fireworks behind him and the president looking to make some remarks and comments when he arrives here, Mel.
And we also know he's joked about putting his own face on Mount Rushmore, but it looks like it's not there quite yet. Julie Tsirkin, thank you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.